What's up, Warriors? Hope you are well. In this video, we're going to go through how to use given data and metrics on suppliers to evaluate their performance and prioritize where we want to do some further problem solving and collaboration in order to improve performance towards the pursuit of quality. So let's get down to it. Let's look at what we have given to us. We have performance by 4 suppliers over some sort of constant time period. So it could be for a quarter, it could be for several weeks. That part doesn't really matter as long as it's the same time period for all 4 suppliers. We have given metrics on their average lead time, their on-time delivery. I'm just going to put that up here as well. And their percentage of damage loads for that given time period. We also have weights. And so the weights have to do with our leadership within our organization, in this example, the manufacturer, in terms of how much each of these criteria, how important it is to the manufacturer. So in this case, not everything is equally important. The average lead time is a little more important than the damaged loads percentage, which is a little bit more important than the on-time delivery. I'll just make this match for clarity's sake. All right, so this is what we have. So at the end of this, once the smoke clears, we're going to have an evaluation of supplier performance, and we're going to see who's not performing the lowest based on this data that we have and how important these aspects of performance are for our leadership. And that will tell us which supplier we might want to talk to first and why. Okay. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to copy this and we're going to paste this right down here. This isn't really necessary. I mean, I guess in the truest sense. But if you're starting out with this and you just want to be sure of your computations, again, slow is fast. This is the way that I recommend. You just take these couple steps and you'll bulletproof yourself towards making any kind of hasty errors or things like that. There are ways to kind of speed this up, but I don't know if that's necessarily an approach I would recommend starting out. So we have this shell of a framework here, and so what we're going to do, just to make a note to ourselves, is that more is better. And what that means is that I'm going to give the leading supplier in this particular category. In this example, it's average lead time. I'm going to give them more points than lesser performance and lesser performing suppliers. And so it's kind of the opposite of first place. You know, the supplier that gets first place, well, they win. They get a 1, and that would be less is actually better, which is a fine technique to use, but sometimes it confuses people. So I'm just going to go with more is better. In the end, as long as you use the same approach throughout your entire model, it is definitely less relevant of which approach you use than your interpretation of the result and getting the same result. So I'm just going to use more is better. So here, when we're looking for lead time, that is not what more is better is referring to. We're looking for the best lead time, and therefore the lowest lead time is what we would want, because when we place an order, we don't want any time to pass at all until we get the order. We just kind of put up with and tolerate the time that does pass. So in this case, Murphy has the best average lead time, so we're going to give Murphy a 4, and then Bonner has the next at 3, Donner has the next at 2, and then Connor finally 1. And so then we move on to on-time delivery. Here, the higher number is better because we want a higher percentage of on-time delivery. And so we see that Bonner comes in at the best at 4, And then Donner is at 2. And then Connor is at 3. And Murphy is at 1. Now you can see here that sometimes Excel doesn't always know what I'm trying to do, and there might be some kind of formatting that's already been in place, or kind of what I call a ghost in the machine. That I don't know why Excel is doing this. I don't want percents down here. So what I'm going to do is right click, and then I'm going to go down to Format Cells. And so for some reason, Excel has these coded as being percentages, but they shouldn't be. They should be point values, just like their neighbor over here. So I'm just going to recode them as numbers. And right now, I don't really need those decimal places because it's just going to make more noise on the screen. So I'm going to get rid of any decimal places, and I'm going to say OK. And that just cleans that up, although that's not what I entered. So I might just have to clear that all out and start over again. I apologize for that, but it's a good thing that you might encounter. And just, when something doesn't look right, you just have to develop the ability to, bottom line, be smarter than Excel. Excel's a great help, but sometimes anyway, it's not a human being. That's the bottom line. Okay, so 3 and 1. I think we got that straight. Okay, and we're going to move right along. Now, damaged loads is kind of like lead time. We don't want damaged loads. Ideally, this would be 0%. So the best performer of damaged loads is Donner, coming in at 4. Again, here's Excel doing that. So rather than enter these numbers and then just have to clear them out again, I'm going to go ahead and fix this like I did before. And it gives me that 0. Fine. I'm just going to get rid of that. But the formatting is still there. So back to 4, 3, 2, 1. And that matches the performance above. Again, more is better. Now, if I wasn't taking these weights into account, if the leadership said, hey, all performance, all of these aspects of performance are equally important, then there would be no need to go through this integration and taking into account these weights because they're all weighted the same. However, our leadership has indicated that some aspects of performance are more important than others. So we're going to take that into account here in a second. But right now we have unweighted performance. We're going to go ahead and copy this one more time just to be straight, and we're going to clear out the guts inside. Okay, and so now what we're going to do is we're going to take this performance in account to its corresponding weights. Now, one thing to watch out for is to state the obvious and not insult anyone, but you've got to know what you're trying to do as opposed to just moving numbers around. And so in this model, we can see that conveniently my weights are in the order of my column. That was convenient. And if you're given something different, you might want to rearrange it to make things more convenient and harder for you to make a mistake. But it might not always be that way. So rather than just, you got to be careful about grabbing these weights blindly, thinking that they're already lined up for what you're about to do. So here, what we're going to do, and I'm just going to do this horizontally and show you a little hack of kind of how to do this. So here for average lead time, we're going to take Donner's actual performance, which was that 2 that we assessed, and then we're going to multiply it by that weight of the average lead time. Now, since we're going to eventually drag this box down in a moment and do that same computation for Connor, Bonner, and Murphy, we're going to anchor that weight that's over here. Because as we drag, we don't want to go to these other numbers because they don't have anything to do with our weight for average lead time. So to prevent, and I'll just show you what happens if we don't do this Actually, let me show you the right way first. So we're going to put, by anchoring, I mean, we put those dollar signs, as my son would say, cash, cash, money, around that letter, and then we hit enter. Okay, and just to show you what that looks like again, up here. Okay, and then we are eventually going to drag this down, and that populates these other cells. Now, I don't know why we don't have 2 decimal places in each one. We probably should fix that. We could fix that later, but for now, that's fine. So I'm just going to back up a step. I'm going to clear all this out. So this is the correct way of doing it, what I just showed you. I'm going to back up a step and do this incorrectly. This is what to not do, just to be clear, which is to reference the average lead time performance and then reference the respective weight for average lead time. So everything looks good right now, but let's suppose we don't, and we hit enter, and we see what we didn't do was we didn't anchor that average lead time weight. And that's a problem because when we drag this down, Excel is going to give us some numbers, and we're going to think, oh, it gave us numbers, so these are correct. Well, they're not correct. And Excel's not very good at telling us that they're not correct. The reason they're not correct is that if we just, number one, this is 0, and so that doesn't make any sense. When you eyeball these numbers, none of those are non-zero, and none of these are non-zero. So that number there shouldn't be 0. But when we look at the formula in any one of these given cells, so let's look at this formula. C11, so it's referencing this. That's great. But then it's referencing H5. Well, H5 isn't the weight for average lead time. It's the average, on-time delivery weight. So this number, fancy Jackson Street word, is erroneous. It's not the proper number or computation that should be in that cell. So this is deceiving because Excel's not yelling at you saying, hey, you did this incorrectly. So you might keep on going and make that mistake or that error 2 more times, have some numbers, blindly add them up, and you would just, unfortunately, be in the wrong place. So back to the right way of doing things. We'll clear all this out. We're going to start up here. We're going to go to that average lead time performance. That doesn't need to be anchored, but this does. That average lead time weight. And we're going to hit enter. And now we're going to go over here. We could go down here and do the same thing, and that wouldn't be incorrect. But just to show you a little hack, I'm going to go over here, and for on-time delivery, I'm going to refer to Donner's on-time delivery number. I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to go over here and reference their on-time delivery weight. Of course, because I want that to be anchored as we go down, I'm going to anchor that. Now, you notice here, this is a little suspect. It didn't give me a decimal number, and I probably should have one. So I'm going to fix that here in a moment. And I'm going to go over here, but before I do that, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to refer to Donner's damage load number and multiply by that respective weight. Okay, so again, that doesn't look right either. It's because Excel is rounding up. For some reason, the formatting in these cells is not what it is over here. So I can fix that in 1 of 2 ways. For starters, I need to highlight that entire array. The other thing, I could right-click and go to Format like I did earlier in the video. I think I'm just going to go to this, what I call the Troy hack. A warrior named Troy taught me this one time. Thank you, Troy. And so this is where we can increase the decimal. So we're going to go out, bam, that 2 places is what I want. So I'm just going to hit enter for now. Okay, now I still don't have these 9 spaces filled in yet. So what I'm going to do is just left click on this one, and I'm going to click all 3 like that. So I left clicked here, I held down, and I highlighted all 3. And then I'm going to grab this little right hand corner, hold down with my mouse, and pull down like that. And when I let go, I get numbers for each one. And when I was starting out, I like to kind of eyeball this and say, okay, just pick a number. All right. So let's talk about this cell. And what I'm doing here is I'm just spot checking Excel to make sure everything is functioning okay. So if this computation has been performed correctly, it should be the product of 4, this 4 right here, times that 0.25. And we know that 1/4 of 4 is indeed 1, or 4 times 0.25 is 1. So that all looks good to go. All you have to do is spot check 1, maybe 2 numbers. I certainly wouldn't spot check them all. But sometimes that's all that's necessary to see if Excel is functioning the way it should, or if you told Excel to do something that you didn't mean to do. Okay, we're almost done. So at this point, I'm going to sum these numbers horizontally, and I'm going to pick the one that is the least value, because more is better. And the one with the least value will be that supplier that has the lowest performance of the 3. So we could do this. We're going to sum, and we're going to sum these 3 numbers this way. And that'll give us a total down here. Okay. And again, all I have to do is drag, because I didn't reference anything. And so when I drag, it's going to give me those respective totals that it should. Okay. As we can see, 1.85 is the least. Okay. So the best performance out of the 4, which I suppose would be relevant if I wanted to congratulate that supplier. But really what I want to do is have a healthy conversation with Connor about their performance. And, I might kind of see, and matching. I said, well, it's not necessarily the first thing I want to talk to Connor about is not necessarily the damaged loads. Probably what I want to talk to Connor about first and foremost is their low performance, the 7.1, and how it's the lowest of all 4, and lowest and therefore longer than the rest. Because if they were to fix that, then they wouldn't be the lowest performing supplier here. And the reason for that is also because they're underperforming in the area that means the most to the manufacturer, my leadership. So if they address that, we sort of mentioned root cause a little bit here in class. We haven't mentioned it to the degree we're going to in the future, or covered it. So more to come. So if we fix that, that's probably the root cause, a leading cause of their low performance. And while these other areas can improve, their on-time delivery can improve, but it's not that much behind the others, and they're actually doing quite well in terms of damaged loads. Of course, another way of looking at this is comparing these metrics against what they actually contracted for, but that's a little bit beyond the scope of this problem right here. So hopefully this gives you something that, whether you did it during this video or not, that you can follow along with this video. This gives you a reference on how to do this. A few things very quickly. If we did this with 2 suppliers, then it would be relatively simpler. We would give the leading supplier in an area 2 points and the other one 1 point. If we did this with 5 suppliers, we would go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you, I'm not going to talk about ever if you have tying performance and things like that. That gets a little bit into the advanced stuff, advanced pieces of this, and those are certainly relevant. But just starting out, we'll keep it relatively simple so that you can develop the foundational skills that you need to rock things out in the future. So I hope this video helped you. And of course, always warrior on.